Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Couch Philosophy, the podcast, a new podcast about whatever philosophical topics, coming at topics from a philosophical angle.
Non-philosophical topics.
You just heard my co-host Clovis Wong. They're here to give me guidance, give me wisdom. My name is Reese LaRose. I'm the primary host. Or we can be co-hosts. It can be.
That's fine.
It can be equal.
I will lean into this role.
All things being equal, what have you been up to lately, Clovis?
Oh well, I just got back from SakuraCon this morning, so that was exciting. I got to check a bunch of artist booths, see a bunch of friends.
And this is the last day of SakuraCon.
Yeah, last day. It is currently April 17th, I believe, if I can count.
Yeah.
Looking at my phone.
We believe it's April 17th. If all goes well, you'll be listening to this on April 18th. Or it might be a little later. But you do anything fun at SakuraCon?
I mean, usual. Honestly, it's just been so long since I've been to a con, with the state of affairs, as it were. So it was a little weird to be around so many people, but people were pretty good about masking, and it was cool just to connect with folks, be part of the ambiance, as it were, see all the awesome cosplay. So yeah, it was a good time.
Cool. As part of these life updates, I want to say congratulations, Mateo, my baby brother, who's just born. I have another brother. My dad is divorced, and that's why they're still having kids.
It's complicated.
In case you're wondering. But yeah, there's a cute new little guy in my life right now. And he is a baby, so that's
babies.
That's fun.
Gotta love them. They're pretty cute.
Another update. Originally, we were going to do a segment called "What You Playin'" or "What You Watchin'," but that is, I think, a little too corny. So we're just going to keep it to general updates. My general update is that I finally beat the 4 Lords in Dark Souls.
Wow.
Everyone's been gushing about Elden Ring, and I think that's still the cool thing to be talking about. But I feel like there's no way I can even try that before I finish the original thing that started it all. So I'm stuck in the past a little bit. Have you played anything lately, Clovis?
I mean, I'm just a sweaty MOBA player, so I'm still playing League of Legends, old game. It's filled with boomers now. But yeah, I just been competing in amateur Platinum and Under tournament with my homies, and we just locked our first seed in regular season, and we're gonna start playoffs soon, so that's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. Are there actually boomers now, or is that...
That was mild exaggeration. Boomer, gamer boomers, though,
So
big
what is
millennials.
That?
Millennials are boomers. We get smurfed by these 15-year-olds. Their mechanics are so good.
If you remember the Wii, it just reminds me of these gamer memes that are if you remember the Wii or if you remember the DS, you're old.
It's true, though.
It's so manipulative. I mean, you are not old if you remember.
I tried to play StarCraft the other day, and I couldn't feel my hands after 2 games. My fingers are going numb. I don't have it in me anymore, Reese. It's over.
It's really scary that everyone in my life is talking about. People that are younger than me are talking about feeling the effects of aging, and I probably am, but more so mentally. But I don't know. My body is just nubile and young still. That's how I feel anyway. But
good for you. Good for you.
I've been taking terrible care of it, but today I had a peanut butter, banana and bacon sandwich for lunch, and my breakfast also consisted of mostly bacon, so I'm definitely if you remember when liking bacon was cool, then you're definitely old.
Wow.
Um, so now we're gonna get to the topic of the episode. Maybe it's why you are listening right now. I wanted to talk about, well, Clovis wanted to talk about this too, but trans visibility. We had the Trans Day of Visibility pretty recently, and I used to, the past 2 years, I think I posted selfies because that's kind of the classic way to celebrate it. Oh, I am a trans woman, by the way, and my pronouns are she, her. And what I did this year was actually I did it on all my social media. It's kind of flashy, but I just wrote "Happy Trans Day of Leaving Us Alone" because I feel so like overwhelmed by the visibility lately, and it doesn't feel like the positive that it did 2 years ago or even 1 year ago, which had me feeling a weird way. I also still felt like I wanted to post a selfie or something, and maybe part of it is I've been more dysphoric lately, but I definitely felt like I've been sick of the visibility. I feel like it's everywhere. Do you feel like it's everywhere? Clovis?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can introduce myself too. So I'm Clovis. I guess I'm agender and I use any pronouns, but if that gives you anxiety, then they, them is fine. But really, yeah, I'm kind of pronoun ambivalent. It's complicated. Maybe a topic for another episode.
That could be its
But,
own episode.
Yeah, this whole thing. Clovis's deal with gender. Yeah, I think like a lot of the like visibility rhetoric. I mean, like I think it's always have to be careful making parallels between like gender stuff and like race stuff, you know, because they're different. But it does kind of remind me of like some of the like Asian American visibility or like media representation rhetoric of it's like, oh, like progress is like when there are Asian movie stars and Asian hunks and like that'll be cool and really progressive. But like there's kind of a limit to visibility. It's like sure that can be like one step, but like at what point is visibility just turned into like commodification? Or just like, oh, you get to be visible now because now you're a new demographic for us to sell.
Yeah.
Is this PG-13? Can I swear?
You can swear.
Okay. Like, it's
Sell
just
shit.
yeah, you know, like it's just a new demographic for like corporations to market their shit to, you know. So,
Market
like,
the
that's how
fuck out of their shit. Too.
Yeah, right. So that's why I feel kind of weird about visibility and like it. I don't think it's inherently bad, and like there is a lot of value to seeing voices and seeing identities that are like you, but I feel like visibility in particular, like capitalism is really good at co-opting visibility into like commodification.
It feels very commodifying, especially when the type of things that get applauded the most are like the least radical, like most mainstream kind of capitalist things. Like people want to see like action movies and stuff that I don't feel like it has a ton of substance. I do understand why people are happy about it, and I guess for trans stuff I would be happy if I saw like a rom-com and I wasn't even expecting a trans character or something like that. But at the same time, if it's like Happiest Season or if it's like a very by the numbers like type of work, then I don't even know what's the point. It doesn't feel like the thing that people are so excited about.
Yeah, and it's like I don't want to say this. It's a lot of the visibility stuff, and I think especially this is a byproduct of social media and everything. And I don't think this is always true, and I think there's like a lot of value to like being visible for other people in your community, like whatever that community may be. But I think there is a degree to which like visibility, just as much as it's about giving like strength to the people you're in like solidarity with and like share identity with, it is like to a degree about performance. It's like performative for like cis white hetero folks, and then they can like pat themselves on the back for like, wow, like I'm cool for like seeing this on my timeline, you know, like it's like this weird performative validation thing for quote unquote like normies,
Yeah, it feels
in
like
sense of like normies in as in like white cis hetero
yeah,
folks.
it's always gonna lean white. It's gonna lean like even a certain kind of aesthetic. I feel like
Yeah.
with trans people that this was one thing I wanted to talk about, was that like the type of aesthetic, like it almost is just an aesthetic now that gets eaten up the most by Hollywood and the most by mainstream culture, is like the very thin white, like probably non-binary, or does it even really matter that much? And to that last point, I feel like part of it is if you're non-binary, and this is maybe a controversial take, but if you're non-binary and your focus is on representation, and maybe for sure, like there's a lot of trans rights that non-binary people fight for, that everyone should be fighting for. But if it kind of stops short of like certain systemic or economic changes that are going to actually make life livable for trans people as a whole, then that's a lot more acceptable to people who want to platform you, especially like cis people. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, totally, right. Like this is like the kind. Oops.
That's okay.
All right, we're good. Some technical difficulties here. We're good. But like, yeah, I think some of that visibility is just like it's what's palatable to like cis hetero folks, right? And I think that's like kind of what you're saying. And like an idea that I'm borrowing this from Yasmin Nair, who you should check out because she's really cool. But she writes a lot of like queer like theory, and something that she was pushing was that I'm going to paraphrase here, so I apologize if I kind of butchered this argument. And I'm going to oversimplify it for the sake of summary, but the gist of it was like, if we invest all our time in things like visibility or like gay marriage, or like, not that these things are bad, but who are they actually making better off? And it's the people who are the queer people who are most able to conform and blend into the existing like cis white hetero capitalist structure.
The Pete Buttigieg's.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like the people who benefit the most from gay marriage were like really wealthy gay men with dual incomes. And like marriage, if you actually look at what it is, it's like, sure, like love, yada yada, but it's basically like a legal category that gives you tax breaks. That's effectively what marriage is, like institutionally. And it's like, yeah, we have all this other cultural stuff associated with it, but that's what it is. It's about like joint property ownership. So like, where was I going with this? Yeah, we were talking about like what's palatable to like, right? And it's like what would actually make a lot of queer folks' lives better would be universal health care. Like, right, like that's something that would tangibly and materially benefit a lot of like queer folks. But that's not necessarily something that's palatable to like neoliberal capitalism compared to like, oh, like representation, like
visibility.
You can run a new like Nike ad campaign or something, you know. Something spicy.
Yeah, I just saw that one. Did you see the?
I actually totally just spitballed
trans
that
athlete.
one.
Oh,
that's a real thing. I'm not surprised that's real thing, but I actually had no idea that was a real thing.
It's the first time. Well, not. I know we've just been talking about like not that important visibility is in some ways, but it's the first time that I've heard the word trans in an ad, and it just hit me like a brick because it like pops out, but then it's in a Nike ad. Like I was expecting something different at the
totally,
end, but no, it's just Nike.
Yeah,
but it's just do it.
Right. And I mean, like, that's not to, I think that's important to consider too, because, like, you know, we've just been kind of bitching about representation,
I want to talk about the other side too.
At the same time, like, there is something really real that I don't want to dismiss about, like, I think it's
we don't want shit on people who especially like kids and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the biggest thing. Is like I feel like it's a weird way to say it, but I feel like I've outgrown representation. Like there's a period in my life where it would have really made a difference to me to see like Asian actors, like genderqueer actors, whatnot.
And when you're 6 years old, I'm sure that like Shang-Chi is the coolest thing in the world.
You can wear your goddamn Shang-Chi backpack to school. It's awesome. Like, you know, you can't really like explain to your 6-year-old like, yeah, this is produced by the mega corporation Disney as a way to like farm intellectual property, and like this is just. But like when you're 6, you can't understand that yet. So like it's kind of dope to have your really cool backpack, and everyone's like, yeah, that's awesome, you know. So like I get that, but yeah, I think like, and I mean I don't want to say that's childish either, because that sounds kind of like that's not what I mean either. But you know, like I guess like I kind of like gotten to a point where other things are more important to me politically. Like, yeah, like representation is not like bad, but it's I don't want to like oversell the significance, if that makes sense. Because like I am happy to see more representation. It doesn't make me unhappy. To be clear, it's just like what else is going on behind the scenes? Like who's benefiting from this actually? So like keep that in mind. But like I think it's still fine to like take enjoyment out of the little things.
Speaking from this side of the issue, and I know that gay marriage isn't quite the same, but I feel like it's in a similar vein. I remember when that got legalized federally, and I was super excited. I think that everyone I knew personally and myself was excited. Well, not everyone I knew, like not my parents or whatever. But, we're super excited, but already then I was, I think, online enough that I saw people, it seemed like they were just shitting on it. I realize now that these were mostly queer people, and they were talking about it from the same perspective that we're talking about it now as full adults. But back then it just seemed like why are these people? They like, just want to not be happy, basically. It was what I thought. And like, I do think that there should be space for when like a milestone is met. Like maybe don't shit on it in some forums where like kids are gonna see it and be upset.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but it's like
although there's kids everywhere on the internet now, so I don't know where that is. But
bad. Someone's got to turn off their router.
Like there definitely should be space for both. We can celebrate a milestone that's mostly just about representation, but we can also talk about how like not gratifying that is, and how it's just a placation tactic a lot of times. Especially when it's someone like the president who seems to like to pretend that he cares about trans people and cares about universal health care, but never seems able to do much about it either.
I don't know why. What do you expect him to do? Cancel student debt? Like he said he was going to do for his entire campaign?
I don't know, Joe.
You have to compromise.
Maybe you could try.
This is politics. You can't just do whatever you want.
I mean, yeah. But then I do, okay, we keep going back and forth, but then I do think about the state of things like in the Obama era, like early on, like with how radical even being gay felt, just as just being openly gay. And I mean, it was definitely more radical before my time, before when I was a fetus, a gay fetus. But now
Just come out gay.
I do realize that I have different standards now, and that probably is a good thing. But I do want to be like, oh, okay, well, we've come a decent ways, and that I still do want to believe that with the trans thing generally, that the trans issue, that I don't want this to turn into Joe Rogan, but I do think that it's generally heading in a positive direction. We're definitely seeing an uptick in visibility, which I think historically has also been accompanied with an uptick in negativity. When it gets to the realm of like legislature, that's when I get more worried about it for sure, because it's a lot easier to sway public opinion. And I do think that that's a long journey, especially like in the parts of the U.S. that I don't live in. But it's a bit harder to change legislature, I feel.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think like definitely following what's going on in other states. I mean, not that Seattle's perfect. Like there's a lot of weird stuff and shitty politics in Seattle as it is. But like relative to the rest of the country, at least, like I think Seattle's like a fairly okay, like safe, insulated space to be in, especially if you are middle to upper middle class. You know, if you have enough money, most aspects of Seattle are quite comfortable, which I understand is like not kind of a, you have to be from like sort of a privileged position to enjoy that, but also like comparing to in other states where there's a lot of like really horrendous legislation going on and that will like directly impact like queer and trans folks. It's like, I don't know, I feel weird about it. It's hard to process emotionally.
Yeah. It is something that I got told a lot early in transition, was that, oh, it's going to be fine. And, you know, ultimately it was fine. The thing about visibility is it always feels like overwhelming in that early stage. And sometimes it still can. Like, it definitely feels more scary, even if that's mostly like a mental thing. And you don't ever really know the thoughts and opinions of the person next to you, and sometimes it does turn out to be, you know, like someone threatens to kill you or throws a bottle at you. Stuff like that definitely happened more like early on, which is probably true anywhere. And there's the whole passing thing too. I don't know if we can get to that, or like even the stealth thing. Like there is the...
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about this. So let's stick with this. Yeah.
Okay, I have heard trans women express that they feel like it's actually harder in Seattle because it's harder to pass, or it's especially harder to be stealth, because maybe this is changing, but with the visibility, especially in liberal places, people know what to look for. It's harder to pass.
Yeah, you get some like nice older liberal ladies who are a little too excited to ask what your pronouns are.
Yeah,
it's
and that's
like,
always...
Yo, I'm not sure we have that kind of relationship. You know? Like, I'll tell you when I'm ready to tell you. Like,
yeah. The last few jobs I've had, I didn't get asked my pronouns by my boss as much, but by coworkers for sure I got asked a lot. And I was at this stage in my life where I was like in between detransitioning and not detransitioning.
Okay, so you're like at the halfway point.
It was the worst time to really ask me my pronouns, but what I went with was I don't know at this point, or I'm figuring it out at this point. And I had one woman say like, "That's not acceptable," or like,
What do you mean?
"You
That's
need to
not-
give me something to call you because I'm not just gonna call you whatever." Because that was kind of the way I said it. Maybe was, call me
Yeah.
whatever for now.
Yeah.
She was like, "No, not having it." She was on that axis of liberalism where maybe
Yeah.
she's definitely very well intentioned, and I'm not trying to say she wasn't,
But also intentions are kind of bullshit. Like, you
yeah.
can make mistakes, but like, everyone makes mistakes, but like, figure
It's
out what you
definitely
fucked up on.
one of the
then
more
you fix it.
uncomfortable moments and I've experienced recently, but there is that aspect of trans visibility and like liberalism, and it being a little harder to navigate sometimes in like more liberal areas, whereas in like a very conservative area you can kind of just be femme enough and pass enough that it's not, you're probably still going to be worried about it at times, but it might not actually be as much of a problem most of the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I wonder if that. All right, this is a little bit spitbally here, so maybe I'm totally off base. Like, say something, but like,
That's okay.
I wonder if it's. I think in Seattle, people are more like exposed to like non-gender conformity anyway, and once that's like on the table, like everything's kind of fuzzy, you know? Whereas if you're in a place that like gender conformity is like really, really strong,
Yeah.
then it's easier to like have a box for you to like put yourself into, you know, if that makes sense?
Yeah. And this is something that gets talked about a lot in the trans community, is the concept of binary privilege, and the idea that if you can more easily fit into a box and you don't actually need a system that fundamentally changes the way that people look at gender, then in a lot of situations, especially more in like places where gender is more binary, or that's the way that people view it, then people argue there's a certain kind of privilege that comes along with that. I think that the way that binary privilege gets talked about a lot, and I don't know if there are like academic writings on this, or it's more of just a thing that people like to throw around. But I've definitely seen it thrown around at people who kind of talk about what I'm talking about now, which is like, you aren't going to get asked your pronouns as much, and getting asked your pronouns isn't the worst thing. It's fine. Like, I'm not trying to say this makes life harder for binary trans people or something like that, but it can be, you can have a situation, this is something that Natalie Wynn talked about, where you're getting your gender questioned a lot more, and it can be just as innocuous as pronouns, but in a way that you would never get your gender questioned in other parts of the world that aren't like exceedingly liberal.
Right. And yeah. I think I know what you're talking about too. It's like, yeah, right. And I think it's like, not saying that asking people's pronouns are bad, but like, you should normalize asking everyone their pronouns, right? If you're going to do that, like, don't like eyeball the room and be like, that person looks
in a
cis,
perfect
that person
world,
looks cis, that person looks cis. Oh, that person looks kind of like genderqueer. I'm only going to walk up to that person and ask them their pronouns. That is kind of weird, right? Because you're basically calling on this person to like out themselves
that
for
happens
your comfort.
more
You know,
often.
that's kind of weird.
And some people might want that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, again, like everyone has
And
a
in a
very different
perfect
experience of being genderqueer or whatever. So like, yeah, there might be some people who feel really validated from that. So like, not to discount their experience, but yeah.
We want a world where people ask for pronouns a lot more often, or even, I mean, you can wear pins and stuff too, and Zoom call thing where you put your pronouns next to your name, I know is cool, has been cool for a lot of people, or like I can see that being a useful thing too. But the way that pronouns get approached a lot by people who are probably well-meaning, but just are hyper aware of this and aren't really questioning how they're going about it. This thing where you just like approach anyone with a gender variance and then they are always going to get the question.
Right,
like
right.
I don't think that even in Seattle, well, definitely more so in Seattle, but people who are obviously cis and like fit pretty well, pretty gender conforming, I don't think that they get asked like just on the street or like just like I'm going to see a show, and it's usually people I barely know, and they probably aren't going to refer to me
In the
like,
third person.
yeah, sometimes that'll happen where you get asked and then the person never refers to you or talks to you again.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
why
like-
did you ask me?
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
just uncomfortable. And also, I feel like sometimes people have an answer that they're looking for. Like,
yeah, right. It turns into this weird thing where they're like, please validate my discomfort of not knowing. You know, it's like you'll find out when you need to find out. Like I'll tell you.
yeah,
Like-
or just
Relax.
overdoing it. Like, oh, that's so cool. Or like, we need a. Oh, okay, cool. Oh, and my pronouns are I knew your pronouns too, but
yeah.
Eh,
Like, you know, like they're trying a little too hard to relate to you in a way that doesn't actually make sense, you know? Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, you know, to borrow another, like, it's like a microaggression almost. Like, it feels like a microaggression, you know? It's like, you know, like, I guess you can't see me, but I'm ethnically Chinese. I'm Chinese American. But, you know, sometimes, like, white people come to you and they're like,
and I'm white, just so you know.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Reese is white. Yeah. I noticed. And anyway, but like sometimes like if white folks approach you and you're a person of color, and like this is my experience being Asian, and they're like, oh, like where are you from? You know, like all these leading questions, and I'm like, yeah, I'm from Bellevue. And they're like, well, where are your parents from? And I'm like, Edmonton. They grew up in Canada, and they're like, no, but like where are your people from? You know, like they kind of want a specific answer, and then they try to relate to you. They're like, my neighbor when I was 12 was Korean, and I'm like, that's nice. I'm actually Chinese. It's a different place. They use a different language. The people are different. They're geographically distinct. They technically share a border. One is a peninsula. One is like this is it's just like I understand what you're trying to do, but you're just making this worse. You know?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the feeling I get where sometimes like well-meaning folks don't quite get why pronouns are important, or like they just know that like, oh, pronouns is the like trendy thing, you're supposed to ask the pronouns, but like if you haven't thought deeper why or what the context for it is, then like you can end up making people uncomfortable, I guess.
Yeah, you're gonna seek out a certain kind of person that you want to ask.
Yeah, I am.
I mean, it's not as bad. And this other thing isn't as bad either that I'm going to talk about. It's also probably a microaggression. But I feel like before trans visibility was at where it is now, so many people, their only exposure was RuPaul's Drag Race. And this gets talked about a lot as like something against drag. When I have nothing against drag, and I think drag is cool. It's a cool culture. I've met, and lots of my friends are drag.
Some of my best
drag
friends
kings.
are drag.
But it's nothing against drag, but it's maybe more specifically RuPaul, and it's
yeah.
like the type of people who are also well-meaning and would watch that, and then come up to someone like me who I do not look like any of the women in RuPaul,
Yeah. Yeah.
any
Yeah.
of the queens in RuPaul's Drag Race, and basically talk to me like I'm a drag queen and say I'm like fierce or like get it girl, or like I feel like
Yeah.
you have this vibe of like,
Yeah. It's
or
like weirdly like
there's so many microaggressions I could
appropriative.
talk about.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, like questions about pegging. Like, just go fucking ask your boyfriend how he wants to get pegged. Like, I don't have anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, right. It's like it gets. I mean, like gender and like sexuality is like related. Like you have to talk to them together, kind of. But it's also like people like sexualize being genderqueer or being trans in a way. Like, and I think some of it comes from this like this kind of drag conception of being trans, where it's just like, oh, you're cross-dressing, I guess. Like, it's kind of, I think, like, for a lot of cishet folks who see that and they don't, like, think more deeper into, like, gender identity, then they're just like, oh, it's just, like, cross-dressing. Which is, like, totally missing the point, though, right? Because, like, that's not what identity is about. And gender's, like, a lot more than, like, the clothes you wear, you know?
It's a lot to assume about someone you don't know.
Yeah,
when
like,
it's
that's their business, you know.
it's cool, but it's also a character, you know. Like,
Yeah, right.
it's just a lot. But I feel like we drifted a little bit off of the visibility thing. So another thing I wanted to talk about was trans femme visibility versus trans masc visibility.
That's a big one, yeah.
And I feel like it's so focused on trans femmes right now, and it so often has been, which isn't really a good thing for anyone.
Yeah.
But so many of the arguments that are being made politically by the right now, in this country and in the UK and other places that I'm less aware of, I'm sure. That if you just take these arguments and you flip them around, you realize how much they're erasing trans men, or aren't aware of like the consequences of this for trans men. Like the sports thing, the bathroom thing, you don't, I mean, this gets brought up a lot, but it's definitely going to make people more uncomfortable if there's like very masked trans men that are now forced to use women's restrooms.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And I mean, like, part of this comes down to, like, I think in the right-wing imagination, you know, there's this kind of, it's like contradictory. It's like, oh, there's all these like hidden trans predators all throughout society, like just waiting to strike, you know. But at the same time, there's this like right-wing conception of like, oh yeah, you know who's trans just by looking at them, you know. Like, I feel like both those ideas exist simultaneously in a contradictory way in like this right-wing ideological formation, you know.
Yeah, they definitely don't. They definitely don't know the difference between like a stone butch dyke and a trans man.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, you can't really tell, you know. That's kind of the whole point. People look a lot of different ways, you know. Even cishet folks look a lot of different ways. This is kind of how people work, you know. They come out looking different. It's kind of a major thing.
Yeah.
You can't really tell.
And the question is, why are trans women focused on so much? And is it because they make there's probably a way that this might apply to women too, but does it make men question their sexuality?
Yeah.
Or is it just more it seems like the discomfort is so visceral and it's so low down, and I don't think that people make the joke a lot that like anyone who has a problem with trans people or gay people is gay or trans, and I don't think that's true. I think it's a really tired and boring argument to be made every time. Like any of them might be, or they could be, and it doesn't really make much of a difference. But
yeah, in a way it doesn't matter, right? It's like transphobia can be propagated by people of all identities transphobia doesn't really care what mouthpiece it comes out of, you know.
But definitely a trans woman being very visible seems like it pisses people off more sometimes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think there's like layers to it. I think one is like the right wing kind of fantasy of like, oh, the man in the dress predator kind of like,
And
that's like a
yeah.
big media trope. I feel like there's a ton. I can't think of any off the top of my head. But
Yeah,
like,
well,
there's a lot
Silence of the
movies.
Lambs. You can go back to that fucking Michael Caine movie, and there's all of it is not even that old. I think like the first example I can think of is Psycho, and that was based off of Ed Gaines, I think. Someone who, that's fine. You can leave that.
I got it. We're not gonna edit this out. By the way, I'm just like, because you can't see what's happening, I keep like unplugging the charging cable because I'm a klutz.
I am making you like sit on it.
Nah, you're good.
The computer we're recording on this is charged now, so we don't actually need it.
All
but
right.
sorry, wait. So the person who kind of started this all wasn't even trans or a cross-dresser. He just liked to make people's skin into furniture, which is a fun hobby for anyone, and I feel like shouldn't be held against trans people. But this kind of jump-started Psycho, and then that started like a lot of this media depiction of, which seems to always be either an element of like how someone is portrayed, or it's like that's just who trans people are.
Yeah.
Did you have something to say? It looks like
No. I was just gonna make a dumb joke about
God.
like if how come this guy can go out in the woods and shoot a bear and like stick it in his home, but when I start putting human skins around my house, that's weird. Like double standard.
We
much.
live
Like,
in a society.
I just need a few human pelts in my room to.
Everyone has a problem, and that's the issue we should really be talking about.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, anyway.
We're stuck talking about trans visibility for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see if that one makes the final edit.
No, that'll make it. But
Perfect. Good.
Trans
Gotta keep
women...
my very inappropriate zingers in that will be totally quoted out of context.
And they're even better when we've moved on from the topic.
Yeah, I don't even remember what we were talking about now.
Like,
perfect.
I think you should just save them all, and like we can have
we can have a blooper reel,
them,
Like, yeah, nice.
To go back to the topic.
Yeah.
Trans women seem to really always be painted with that brush.
Yeah.
To the extent that it's affecting real legislature and real. One thing that I saw recently was a trans woman who was not maybe identifying as a trans woman yet, but was in the early process of transitioning, who made these TikToks in her basement, and people started headcanoning. Headcanoning, by the way, is when you make a conspiracy theory, but it's about a work of fiction. Although I guess this is not a work of fiction, which is
that's
why
when it gets problematic, Like
that's what makes it fucked up.
Yeah.
Is it is just a conspiracy theory, but it seemed like these kids were coming at it like it was just fun little fan theory.
Yeah.
But they made a theory that she was a serial killer and started like really getting into that theory, and then obviously she came out at some point, and this being thought of that way by people who knows what their politics are, and it's not even that relevant.
Matter,
but are just so inundated by this visible cultural archetype that they put her in this box, and they felt like it was okay because the liberal ones probably felt like it was okay because she didn't seem to be trans.
It's weird. Like,
let's
why
just take
this,
anyone with any gender variance and put them in that box.
Right, and it's so weird that not weird. Like, it is. there are people who benefit from this like mythos being perpetuated to, like, because of and not just in spite of it, because of the harm it causes. But like, it's kind of bizarre that this myth like has so much cultural weight behind it, given that like empirically, if anything, it's the opposite. Like, being gender nonconforming or gender queer any form massively predisposes you to being the recipient of violence and like exploitation, not the other way around. So it is kind of a weird projection, you know, like.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing to project on like the one trans kid in your state, or like stuff like that with like bathroom bills. And
it's just like, why are you making the two kids you just really want to play baseball like go through this, like like just let him play baseball?
Yeah.
You know, doesn't have to be such a big deal.
And yeah, you have to wonder who's benefiting. Definitely trans men are not benefiting from this either. Like, the issue for them is very different, but it's gotta be, I imagine, pretty isolating.
Yeah.
To feel like your existence never gets acknowledged, even when people are explicitly talking about trans people, or when they're talking about representation. Like, I feel like we see a little more trans mask representation now, but it's like we've said already, it's usually like more geared towards like very white, kind of feminine, like non-binary spectrum people, which is also valid to to that also need representation too. But like, even with that, so many trans mask people are not represented in any shape or form.
Yeah.
That's gotta feel bad. So
yeah, it's like a different kind of like problematic, you know.
And I think that benefits everyone if trans men get more visibility, because like I said before, it does kind of defeat a lot of the arguments that the right totally makes.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it does, but at the same time, like, I think there's part of why the right is fixated on trans women is, I think, because this is going to sound weird, and I don't mean that it's more or less valid, but like in an analytical sense of how like cis heteropatriarchy operates, right? The existence of trans women is a lot more threatening to the institution of patriarchy than the existence of trans men. Because in a way, like, patriarchy is, like, the implicit assumption is that being a man is better, right? Like, that's kind of, like, part of the fundamental, like, basis of patriarchy, right? So in some ways, like, not that, like, trans men validate the patriarchy, that's not what I'm trying to say, but, like,
no.
Right, because, like, it is clearly subversive in a lot of other ways. But, like, someone being assigned socially like the like so-called privilege of masculinity, right, choosing to like discard that and say like, this is not me, I don't want this, that is really threatening to the institution of patriarchy, right? Because it's just like, whoa, like the thing that we have socially deemed the best and the most valuable, like someone is saying they don't want it, and that's like extremely threatening, right, to the entire structure of like patriarchy. So I wonder if that's like related to that anxiety around trans women specifically, because it really tears apart like the really fundamental basis of patriarchy.
Yeah, I think it can be really hilarious. Also, it's depressing, but when people try to pretend that people are actually transitioning because it's making their lives easier, and that's people who say it's a trend or some kind of fad, but
these people have clearly never tried gender transitioning before.
Yeah, and even for trans men who it is, you know, like thought of in society that being a man is easier. I don't think that being a trans man is easy, but
Yeah, that's its own thing.
yeah,
Unfortunately, we do not have any trans men on our broadcast
yeah.
currently.
If
So
we did, then we could maybe talk about TMA and TME and all like the trans misogyny
yeah.
and the way that trans men relate to that. But just the
It's out there. I'm sure there's good resources for it.
I wanted to say gaslighting. If it sometimes feels like gaslighting, I know that that's a term that gets overused, but that a lot of the times, especially from like right-wing men, it feels like trans women are getting gaslit that like their lives have now become somehow easier, or that they are, because that's part of the whole argument too, that women somehow have it easier than men.
Right, yeah.
So that gets thrown around a lot, and I think that it boils down to basically no one wants to acknowledge that trans misogyny, that being a trans woman isn't really a way to get out of misogyny or to get out of like maybe whatever men's rights activists like to complain about. It's actually a hell of a way to experience both.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Exactly. Like that's the horror, the comedy of the situation, you know, of like you get to be whatever's convenient to other people
yeah,
at that time, which I feel like you get like the worst of everything.
yeah, and that, yeah, that applies to a lot of people. I think we could even say, but definitely it feels like, yeah, that's a switch that can flip really easily whenever someone wants to make any sort of argument, and it's always gonna
Yeah.
fit that side. Oof,
All right,
I feel like
that was a lot.
it got pessimistic. Can you think of anything
I mean,
optimistic?
yeah, I mean, I can, you know, optimistic, but I can share like a little bit personally too, because
Okay,
like
yeah, let's
this is
do
a little
that.
bit about like my own personal like gender journey. I guess it's still ongoing, and I guess this is a nice way to come back full circle too, because it's going back to pronouns, and I guess like I felt kind of weird recently because it like felt weird about giving pronouns. So I guess to explain a little bit about my journey, like I was assigned male at birth, and I kind of just like went through life like that. It was fine. I don't think I experienced like major body dysphoria. I mean, I did, but for other reasons besides gender. Anyway, that's maybe another episode.
Yeah.
But and like around last year, I decided I felt like, yeah, I think I am agender. Like I don't feel like I don't experience gender euphoria from identifying as male, but I also don't want to identify as female or anything else. So I was just like, yeah, I feel comfortable identifying as agender. And it was like a very internal process for me. It wasn't something that I really projected outward. And I only like really told people casually, like after the fact, after I'd like kind of thought through it myself already. Because in a way, I didn't really care what other people thought. Like it was something really just for me internally. But I've never been sure what pronouns to give people, because like at first I started saying like, oh, they, them, but I'm not sure I actually liked that, if that made sense. And it was weird because I think in the present moment, a lot of like gender identity and like being genderqueer is about pronouns. Like that is like the main thing. And not to say that pronouns are unimportant. Like you should refer to people the way they want to be referred. Like that goes beyond gender. Like if someone's like, yo, my name's like Samuel, and you're just like, okay, David, and just call Samuel David, that'd be kind of like a jerk thing to do, you know, just refer to people the way they want to be referred to. But like I guess I felt weird because I actually I'm just not that invested in what pronouns use for me, which I think is a hard thing to say because like I feel like there's not space for that narrative right now. Like culturally, people don't know what to do with that because like I'm like, yeah, use any pronouns, but then that makes people kind of anxious. I think they're just like any pronouns, like yeah, whatever. Like, what do you think I look like? Use that, whatever. Like it's chill. And I think some of it's cultural because I'm a native English speaker, but I grew up in like kind of a bilingual household, speaking English and Cantonese. And in Cantonese, along with most Chinese spoken dialects, there's no gender pronouns. It's the same pronoun for he, she, it. Technically they, but that becomes more grammatically complicated. Won't go into that. But like there's no gender pronouns in Chinese, and my parents like can never get anyone's gender pronouns right, like no matter who they are. Like it's not, I don't think it's a transphobic, they just are linguistically confused about pronouns because they're bilingual, and not English native speakers. So I think that's like something I internalize. It's just like pronouns are not a big part of my identity, which is all to go to say like I've been telling people to like use any pronouns, but if that makes you uncomfortable, they them is fine. And a lot of people who have known me for a long time, like before I like was publicly facing agender, continue to use he him pronouns, and that's fine with me. Like it doesn't bother me at all, and it's like don't generalize my my beliefs to like other gender free folks, but like for me it didn't really matter because like it was something internal for me. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. So I'm whatever pronouns are good, and I'm just not sure. This is like the opposite of transvisibility of like I feel really gender in because I'm like very like cis passing, and like I'm kind of apathetic to it, right? So it feels weird to like assert my apathy like really aggressively to someone of like, yeah, I really don't care, like you should use any pronouns, like use different ones and say like it's just, and also because like I don't like dress in a traditionally like queer presenting way, and like I'm comfortable with that. I don't feel a need to change the way I dress or present, but in a lot of social contexts I'm like very like cis male passing, and it makes me feel weird, especially in like even like queer or non-binary spaces. And I think this is less to do with like queer folks and more to do with like cis women, I think, of like non-binary being treated as like this woman light category of like, oh, like women and non-binary folks at this, which is like really kind of terrible way to treat non-binary people in general.
Non-binary folks.
Just like that's not how being non-binary works. There's a you're not.
Yeah, there has to be. I don't know how else to say it. There has to be a better way to exclude men, if that is.
Yeah, right. And I mean, sometimes that's what you should just say. Like, if you're, and it should be different for each type of thing. It depends on the talk, right? Like, if just like this is a space that we ask like male allies to like, please don't come to this event, and it's fine. Just like be direct, be explicit about what the purpose and the function of whatever group you're hosting is, and leave it at that. You don't have to do this like hand wavy like microaggression like stuff.
Yeah.
Just say who is welcome. Like this is.
I can see where it gets muddy for people, but yeah, that's not really the way to approach it, and so often non-binary is just treated like woman light, and the visibility thing for you, it's got to feel weird in those spaces.
Yeah, I haven't really been to really any of those kinds of spaces just because like I feel like I would have to like, even if it wasn't weird, like I would have to justify my existence to other people, and I don't want to have to do that, so I'd rather just like, it's cool, like I haven't felt the need to be in a space like that before, so like it's chill, like but it's just something I've been thinking about because of the way I present, and I think it's like really important to understand that like your gender identity is not just your pronouns and the way you dress. Like your gender identity is a lot more complicated. It's about your relationship socially, like your identity in relation to others, who you are to yourself. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not just about appearances and names and like procedures. Although that stuff is also important.
Yeah. And that can be really important. I think that there might be people who get hung up, and we've talked about this a bit. I think they get hung up on the pronoun thing to the extent where they maybe trip over themselves in a way where that's maybe more uncomfortable
Yeah, yeah.
for some. Not that my thing is the same thing, where I was still figuring it out a little bit, but that's sometimes going to make people more uncomfortable, and then just
Having a clear answer, right? Like they want a box to put you into.
yeah, and well, yeah, that's all part of trans visibility. But,
Yeah.
thanks so much for sharing that part of your story, and then there were things there that I didn't know about, so thank you. That felt like some wisdom. Do you want that last bit to be your wisdom of the week, or do you have more?
Sure. That
wisdom?
we can roll with it.
You don't have anything that you're burning to say?
No. I'm out of hot takes for the day.
Okay. Clovis will have more wisdom next week, and hopefully next week it should definitely be out on Monday. So by then it should be figured out, just in case this was uploaded late. So thank you so much for listening. Again, I'm Reese LaRose. We can plug some things if you have anything to plug. Do you have anything to plug?
If you want to watch me play League of Legends, you can go to twitch.tv/FOF esports.
Yeah.
I think they're on YouTube too, but I don't remember their YouTube channel. I think I play on Mondays and Tuesdays, but the schedule's a little weird because we're starting playoffs. So, yeah, that's it right now.
Yeah, and they're really good, so check it out. And then I just released the second to last chapter of my book, and then that full book should be coming out soon. So if you want to read it before it is actually 100% complete, you can go to riesem.com. That's RIESEM.com. And if you want to read my tweets, you can follow me at topbottoming on Twitter. I'm not going to explain what that means, but follow me on Twitter, and there's going to be more updates. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you subscribe to the podcast and keep listening, because we're going to be back next week with a different topic. And that could be literally anything. So stay tuned.
Bye-bye.
Bye.